Okay, this is Federalist 18, part 3. And as you can see in the very bottom, right here, it's for ESL speakers, in case you are a person who speaks English as your first language. This is ESL, means English as a second language. I'm making these videos hoping that people around the world will one day maybe watch them and think about federalism for the world. Federalist Papers, I believe, are the alphabet of the language of federalism in the United States. So if you want to learn a language, you'll learn the alphabet. That's usually the best thing to do. So I am hoping to share my little knowledge of the alphabet of this language with my brothers and sisters around the world. And so one day we might consider uniting under a federal system, putting this madness and tribalism aside, and put our energy, focus on our energy into allowing all the children of the world to flourish, to live up to their full potential, and make a better world for ourselves and future generations, hoping to remind my brothers and sisters around the world that planet Earth is our only home right now, and keeping it healthy is our duty, responsibility, not only to ourselves but to the rest of life on this planet. I believe the creator of the universe, the sustainer and nourisher of the universe is watching us. And if we continue doing what we're doing, we will be ashamed. I have no doubt about that. So let's see. We are going to go to paragraph. Let me count paragraphs. I forgot. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, we're going to start at paragraph 5. We had 4 short paragraphs. As you can see on the board, I've mentioned Madison's speech in the Philadelphia Convention on June 19th, 1787. He talked about the old confederacies around the world, what history books tell us about them. He'd read this from a lot of books that Thomas Jefferson had sent him from France, and Madison had studied these and had made a few pages of notes for himself that we can learn from the past and apply it to better our future. And that's what we're doing. We're going to learn the Federalist Papers, study federalism in the United States, make ourselves familiar with American civilization so that we can look at federalism not just as a lawyer would or not just as a historian would, but as a civilized member of this planet. We learn about literature, we learn about religion, history, law, politics, culture, everything. Because otherwise it won't work. So Madison had looked at those books, had given a speech on June 19th, and here in Federalist 18, 19, and 20, he is writing it so that for Americans to read and see what the mistakes and shortcomings of different confederations had been in the past. So I start with paragraph 5. It happened but too often, according to Plutarch, that the deputies of the strongest cities awed and corrupted those of the weaker and that judgment went in favor of the most powerful party. Plutarch was a historian and biographer. He had written a book that was very popular and remained actually very popular in required reading for Americans, was Lives of the Famous and Noble Grecians and Romans, the old great Greek founders and lawgivers and the Romans. And a lot of the founders would read these, and he's referring here to what he has read in Plutarch about lives of some of these leaders and some of these confederacies. And here, according to Plutarch, the deputies of the strongest cities, the delegates of the strongest cities, would awe and corrupt. Awe means have extreme influence on certain people, the weaker parties, the weaker cities, or corrupt them, or promise them things, promise them money, promise them position. And this way, they would take advantage of the weaker cities and make a mess of this confederacy. Because remember, in the previous paragraphs, it talks about this Amphictyonic League that on paper, in theory, it's a great league. But he says when you actually look at the inner workings of it, it is a mess. It is not good. It's just like the Articles of Confederation, our first constitution that we think is awful, is bad, that we are trying to replace. And then the next paragraph, even in the midst of defensive and dangerous wars with Persia and Macedon, the members never acted in concert and were, more or fewer of them, eternally the dupes or the hirelings of the common enemy. The intervals of foreign war were filled up with domestic vicissitudes, convulsions, and carnage. Okay? He says, even though they were supposed to be a league to defend not only their holy place, but to defend against foreign aggressors, they will always be toys to Macedon. Macedon, remember that's where Alexander the Great came from, Philip, his dad, Philip of Macedon, Philip of Macedonia. He's talking about those places north of Greece. And he says, even when Persians and Macedonians were trying to either attack them or keep them under control, even then they could not really stay united. And the last line that he says, in the intervals of foreign war and in between the wars that were foreigners, they were filled up with domestic vicissitudes, convulsions, and carnage. Remember, anytime he uses the word vicissitude, means ups and downs, something that's not stable, something that's horrible for society. An unstable society becomes chaotic. Chaos always asks for a dictator to come in, put things right, so people willingly give up their freedom so that they'll have stability and not chaos. So he says, in between foreign wars, you had these vicissitudes, you had convulsions. You know how a body gets, when you get real sick and you get convulsions, you start trembling and shaking. So he's liking the society to a sick body. He says these leagues were so weak that they were like sick, weak bodies in the time of serious sickness and carnage, and of course destruction. So the next paragraph says, after the conclusion of war with Xerxes of Persia, it appears that Lacedaemonians required that a number of the cities should be turned out of the confederacy for the unfaithful party they had acted. The Athenians finding that the Lacedaemonians would lose fewer partisans by such a measure than themselves and would become masters of the public deliberations, vigorously opposed and defeated the attempt. Notice this part is exactly like America in 1820s, 1830s, 1840s, and 50s. He says when Lacedaemonians wanted to punish a party that they thought hadn't done their job, or one of the cities that hadn't done their job, they wanted to kick them out, Athens would say, no, if you kick them out, they're usually on our side. That will make us weaker. The same thing when you look at American history, because they left the stain of slavery in the Constitution, then the southern states who wanted to keep slavery and spread it, wanted to extend it, every time a northern state would come join the Union, they wanted to make sure a southern state would, a new state would join too. This way they would not lose their power in the Congress. That's why all those compromises happened. It was all rivalry because of that stain, because of that disease of slavery that they did not attack and wipe away when they wrote the Constitution. Now, I'm not saying if I were there, I would have done it differently, because over the years I've said, over these videos that I've made, especially the ones that I made for Farsi speakers, I have said over and over that human nature being what it is, I am not sure if myself, my parents, would have been any different than the way the founders and their families acted. So I'm not blaming them in that sense. I'm just saying that unfortunately they did not outlaw it after a generation. They thought it would be going away, but they should have been smarter. I knew they were smarter than that. They should have gradually finished it off. They had plenty of land to give to the slaveholders as compensation. But as Jefferson himself said, the disease that comes with having slaves is that you gradually become attached to being a slave master. That mentality, that disease stays with you and it grows, and it's hard to shake that off, to get rid of it.